Book 1. You are the Navigator, a field guide to agency in a complex world. Part 1. The signal in the noise. Chapter 1. The false comfort. The light on the dashboard was green. Captain Miller tapped the glass of the altimeter, a habit from 30 years of flying that he couldn't quite shake, even in this modern fly-by-wire jet. Inside the cockpit, the environment was a masterpiece of engineered calm. The screens hummed with the reassuring soft blue and green glow of total control. The weather radar showed a clear path. The autopilot was engaged. The flight computer calculated a smooth arrival in 45 minutes. According to the instruments, it was a perfect day. But Miller felt the hair on the back of his arms standing up. Through the thick glass of the cockpit window, the horizon wasn't blue. It was a bruised, swirling purple. The airframe wasn't humming. It was vibrating with a low, thrumming frequency that didn't show up on any dial. It was a physical sensation he knew in his bones. The sky was holding its breath. Center. Miller keyed the mic, his voice calm, requesting deviation 20 degrees north. It looks rough ahead. Negative. Flight 402, the air traffic controller replied from a windowless room 500 miles away. Radar shows you are clear. Maintain current heading. Miller looked at the screen. He looked at the window. The screen was a promise. The window was reality. In that moment, Miller faced the choice that defines the modern human condition. Do I trust the sophisticated machine that says I am safe? Or do I trust the raw observation that tells me I am flying straight into a storm? The green light trap. We are all Captain Miller. You might not fly a jet, but you pilot a life. You manage a household, a small business, a team, or a retirement fund. And everywhere you look, you are surrounded by false comfort. Turn on the news, and economists point to indices showing inflation is stabilizing and the market is resilient. They show you the dashboard of the economy, and it is glowing green. But you stand in the grocery aisle holding a loaf of bread that costs double what it did 3 years ago, and you feel that thrumming vibration of instability. You sit in a quarterly review at work. The project manager presents a slide deck where every task is marked complete, and the trajectory is on target. But you know the team is burned out, the software is held together by temporary patches, and the client's silence is ominous. The dashboard says success. The reality is brittle. Why do the instruments lie? It is tempting to believe they lie because the people in charge are malicious, that they are deliberately taping over the warning lights to keep us calm. While corruption exists, the true problem is far more dangerous because it is structural. The problem isn't that the instruments are broken. The problem is that they were designed for a different world. The physics of failure. We have built a civilization equipped with linear instruments to navigate a nonlinear world. Imagine navigating a modern city using a map from 1950. The map is not lying in the moral sense. It is a faithful representation of a world that no longer exists. If you follow it today, you will drive into a river where a bridge used to stand. Our current tools, government statistics, corporate KPIs, quarterly earnings reports, are linear maps. They operate on the assumption of cause and effect. If we pull lever A, result B will happen. They assume that the future will look roughly like the past, just slightly larger. But we have entered an era of nonlinear complexity. In a nonlinear system, a small input does not create a small output. It can trigger a cascade. A virus in a remote province shuts down a factory on another continent, which creates a chip shortage, which halts car production in Detroit, which makes your used sedan worth more than a new one. Everything is connected to everything else in a tangled web. When a storm like that hits, linear instruments don't just fail, they hallucinate. They continue to calculate averages and trends right up until the moment the cliff edge appears. They provide the illusion of control because they are blind to the geometry of the risk. The geometry of intelligence. This explains the anxiety you feel. It is not paranoia. It is a cognitive dissonance caused by the gap between the map and the territory. Your intuition, that vibration in the floorboards, is actually a sophisticated sensor picking up on the nonlinearity that the dashboard is missing. You are sensing the shape of the problem, while the computer is only reading the numbers. To survive the storm, we cannot simply try harder with the old tools. We cannot just elect better pilots to stare at the same broken radar. We need a new class of instrumentation. We need tools that are capable of mapping complexity. We need a specific set of mechanisms designed to capture the truth of a tangled world. 1. Immutable ledgers to fix the past in place, preventing the gaslighting of updated history. 2. Causal engines to simulate the tangled web of consequences before they happen. 3. Multi-objective optimization to navigate for human delight rather than just mechanical efficiency. The rest of this book is not a philosophy of how to feel better about the storm. It is an engineering manual on how to build the compass that gets us through it. Captain Miller looked at the radar. Then he looked at the purple bruise on the horizon. He made his decision. He disconnected the autopilot. "Disregarding," Miller said to the controller. "I am deviating north." He stopped being a passenger. He became a navigator. Now, it is your turn to take the controls. Chapter 2. The Geometry of Intelligence. Imagine a concert hall. The orchestra is playing a complex symphony. There are 100 musicians, violins, cellos, horns, timpani, all playing different notes at breakneck speed. To a computer monitoring the audio feed, the performance is a stream of data. The volume is within limits. The pitch is mathematically accurate. The tempo is steady. But in the front row, an experienced conductor sits with his eyes closed. Suddenly, he winces. He doesn't look at a screen. He doesn't check a decibel meter. He just knows somewhere in the back row, a second violinist hesitated for a fraction of a second. The harmony snagged. The flow was broken. To the machine, it was a permissible variance in the data. To the conductor, it was a topological defect. The shape of the music had been distorted. This ability to perceive the shape of a complex system is not magic, and it is not merely feelings. It is a high-level computational process that our modern instruments are currently too primitive to replicate. The manifold hypothesis. In the research labs of advanced deep learning and complexity science, there is a concept called the manifold hypothesis. It posits that, while the world contains an infinite amount of random noise, meaningful reality, the part that actually works, exists on a specific lower dimensional structure called a manifold. Think of it like a sheet of paper twisted into a complex shape floating in a room. The room is the noise of the universe. The sheet is normal life. When you are healthy, your biological markers sit on the smooth surface of the sheet. When a community is thriving, its economic interactions flow along the curves of the sheet. Your intuition is not a mystic force. It is your brain's ability to recognize the geometry of that manifold. When you walk into a room and instantly sense the vibe is off, your brain is performing a high-dimensional calculation. It is noticing that the data points of the room, the silence, the body language, the lighting, have drifted off the manifold. You are detecting a rupture in the geometry of normal life before the linear data confirms it. This is the geometry of intelligence, the ability to assess the health of a system by its shape, not just its metrics. The dimensional mismatch. If humans are natural-born geniuses at seeing these shapes, why do our organisations fail so often? Why did the air traffic controllers tell Captain Miller the sky was clear when he could see the purple bruise? The failure lies in a dimensional mismatch. We live in a high-dimensional world, a world of millions of connected variables, but we attempt to manage it with low-dimensional tools, spreadsheets, KPIs, and single number scores. Consider the way a bank views a human being. A human life is a complex, swirling manifold of job security, family health, local economy, and future aspirations. But the bank compresses all of that complexity into a single number. The credit score. This is a projection error. The reality, 3D. You are a reliable person who is currently struggling because of a temporary medical crisis in the family. The map, 2D. Your score dropped 50 points. You are high risk. The bank's tool flattens the curve. It smashes the complex shape of your reality into a flat surface, destroying the context. In the process, it deletes the truth. This is the flat earth problem of modern management. We are trying to navigate a curved universe with flat maps. When the territory curves, when a nonlinear crisis hits, our flat tools tell us to keep going straight, right off the cliff. The friction of being human. This mismatch creates the defining friction of our age. You feel the complexity of the problem, the manifold. Your boss/government/bank sees only the linear metric, the projection. They point to the spreadsheet and say, the numbers look great. You point to the vibration in the floorboards and say, the geometry is wrong. Until now, the numbers have won every argument. In a technocratic society, the person with the spreadsheet defeats the person with the intuition. Because we lacked the language to describe the shape, we were told our feelings were invalid. But the science of complexity vindicates the intuition. The doomy feeling you have about the economy or the climate is not a glitch. It is high-fidelity structural data. You are detecting that the system has drifted off the manifold. The need for a translator. We cannot solve this by simply trusting our guts more. Intuition is powerful, but it is personal. It is hard to share. You cannot download your gut feeling into a USB drive and show it to a regulator. To fix the world, we need to upgrade our instruments to match the complexity of our reality. We need tools that don't just measure the average, a flat number, but measure the topology, the shape. We need instruments that can record the tangled web of cause and effect without flattening it. We need a translator that sits between your high-dimensional intuition and the low-dimensional systems that rule the world. In the next section, we will open the blueprint for this translator. We will see how immutable ledgers and causal engines function not as cold machines, but as the necessary architecture for a new kind of human agency. We are done apologizing for our intuition. It is time to build a machine that can keep up with it. Chapter 3. The Missing Instrument. If you were a master carpenter, but you had no wood, no saw, and no hammer, your mastery would be invisible. You could visualize the most beautiful table in your mind. You could describe its geometry perfectly. But until you have the tools to pull that vision out of your head and into physical reality, it remains a hallucination. Right now, we are all master carpenters with empty hands. We possess the geometry of intelligence. Chapter 2. We can sense the nonlinear instability of the world. Chapter 1. We hear the sour note in the symphony before the crash occurs. But we have no way to prove it. We lack the instrument that translates gut feeling into verifiable fact. Because we cannot point to the specific structural fracture in the data, we are dismissed. We are told we are worrying too much. We are told to go back to sleep. The solution is not to abandon our intuition. The solution is to arm it. We need a specific technological architecture capable of bridging the gap between the chaotic truth of the world and the rigid systems that manage it. This architecture relies on 3 precise mechanisms: the airlock, the immutable ledger, and the causal engine. These are not metaphors. They are the engineering requirements for a trustworthy future. 1. The airlock, signal processing. The first function of our instrument must be to defend against noise. We live in a fire hose reality. Global markets, social media feeds, and sensor networks pump out petabytes of raw, unstructured data every second. This data is muddy. It is full of glitches, false alarms, and transient errors. If we let this raw chaos directly into our decision-making process, we get alert fatigue. We panic at every dip in the stock market. We overreact to every rumor. We need a sanctuary. In engineering terms, we need an airlock. An airlock is a strict boundary condition. It sits between the chaotic outside reality and the orderly inside the record. It does not simply let data pass through, it interrogates it. The raw sensor screams that the temperature spiked to 500 degrees for 1 millisecond. The airlock recognizes this as a physical impossibility, a sensor glitch, and rejects the data. The result: the record remains clean. By mathematically filtering the noise, the airlock validates the signal. It ensures that when an alarm does ring, it is not a glitch. It is a verified threat. 2. The immutable ledger, the architecture of truth. Once the signal is verified, it must be recorded, but it cannot be recorded in a standard database. Most modern systems use destructive memory. When a bank corrects an error or a politician deletes a post, the old record is overwritten. The past is erased to accommodate the present. This technological flaw is what makes gaslighting possible. If history can be edited, accountability is impossible. We require an immutable ledger. Immutable is a hard engineering constraint. It means that the system is mathematically incapable of deleting data. It is a digital medium that behaves like stone, not pencil. If a mistake is made, it cannot be erased. A new line must be added to correct it. Line 102, correction to line 101. This is not just permanent ink. It is the technical enforcement of integrity. It ensures that the story of how we got here, the sequence of decisions, errors, and corrections, is preserved forever. It transforms history from a malleable narrative into an irreversible technical fact. 3. The causal engine mastering complexity. Finally, we need a tool to navigate the nonlinear complexity we identified in Chapter 1. A ledger can tell us what happened. An airlock can tell us what is happening. But to survive the storm, we need to know what will happen. We need a causal engine. This is not a crystal ball. It is a computational environment that simulates the physics of cause and effect. It takes the clean data from the airlock and the perfect history from the ledger, and it projects them forward onto the manifold. Because the world is nonlinear, we cannot use simple linear projections. We need an engine capable of multi-objective optimization. We need to see how a change in interest rates will ripple through the housing market, affect the supply chain, and ultimately impact the mental health of the community. The causal engine allows us to run these simulations. It allows us to crash the car in the simulator so we do not have to crash it on the highway. It allows us to test our intuition against the physics of the system. From passenger to navigator. These terms, airlock, immutable ledger, causal engine, matter. They are not jargon to be waved away. They are the components of the navigator. The airlock respects your need for sanity. The immutable ledger respects your need for truth. The causal engine respects your need for foresight. When you possess these instruments, the power dynamic shifts. You are no longer a passenger gripping the seat, hoping the pilot knows what he is doing. You are holding the map. You can see the storm structure. You can prove the danger. In the next part, the mirror of truth, we will take these components into the workshop. We will examine exactly how to construct the ledger and the airlock, moving from the theory of navigation to the practice of building the machine itself. End of part 1. The map is blank. The instruments are ready. Take the wheel. Part 2. The mirror of truth. Chapter 1. The eraser. Sarah knew she had paid the bill. She remembered the specific texture of the morning, the rain against the kitchen window, the cooling coffee, the satisfaction of checking the tasks of her digital list. She remembered opening the app, seeing the balance, and pressing confirm. 2 weeks later, the late fee notice arrived. When she called customer service, the agent was polite but immovable. "I'm looking at the system right now, Ma'am. There is no record of a payment on Tuesday. You must have forgotten." Sarah looked at her phone. The app history was blank. "But I saw it," she insisted, her voice rising. "I saw the confirmation screen." "I am sorry," the agent repeated, "but the system doesn't lie. If it happened, it would be here." Sarah hung up, paying the fee she didn't owe, shaking with a specific, cold rage. It wasn't about the money. It was about the reality. She knew what had happened, but the system had a different version of history, and the system's version was the only one that had legal weight. In that moment, Sarah was not just a victim of a glitch. She was a victim of the eraser, the architecture of gaslighting. We assume that computers are perfect historians. We assume that digital means permanent. This is a dangerous misconception. Almost every system we use today, from your bank's database to your medical records to the government's tax portal, is built on the architecture of destructive memory. Imagine a blackboard. When a teacher writes a new equation, they must wipe away the old one. The chalk dust disappears. The previous state of the board is lost forever. Modern databases work the same way. When you update your address or when a bank updates a transaction status from pending to failed, the computer does not keep the old information. It physically overwrites the specific memory block on the hard drive. It destroys the past to make room for the present. This technical architecture creates a societal vulnerability, systemic gaslighting. Gaslighting is usually defined as a psychological tactic where a manipulator makes you question your own sanity. But in the digital age, gaslighting is structural. In finance, if the database overwrites the pending state, you cannot prove you tried to pay. In politics, if a government website silently edits a policy pledge and deletes the old version, you cannot prove they broke a promise. In safety, if a factory sensor log is reset after an accident, we cannot prove the warning signs were ignored. We are attempting to build a civilization of trust on a foundation of quicksand. As long as the delete button exists, power will always belong to the person holding the eraser, the immutable ledger. If we want to build a navigator, a tool that allows us to find the truth, we must reject the architecture of the blackboard. We must embrace the architecture of the immutable ledger. Immutable is an engineering term that means unable to be changed. It is a constraint, not a suggestion. In an immutable ledger, the delete function does not exist. The overwrite function does not exist. The only action allowed is append. If Sarah's bank had used an immutable ledger, the agent could not have said, "There is no record." The agent would have looked at the log and seen the entire causal chain. Line 101, payment initiated by Sarah. Timestamp Tuesday, 9 a.m. Line 102, system error 404, gateway timeout. Line 103, transaction failed. The record would be there. The failure would be visible as a system error, not a human error. The eraser could not hide the glitch. This is not just a better way to store data. It is a technological requirement for justice. Justice requires precision. In the previous draft of our thinking, we might have said the names don't matter. But here, the name matters intensely. We call it an immutable ledger because the word immutable anchors us to a moral outcome. It signifies that the history of our actions is protected by the laws of mathematics, not the goodwill of a CEO. When a system is immutable, it forces radical accountability. The medical error. A hospital cannot delete a wrong dosage order to hide a mistake. They must add a new line countermanding it. The error remains visible, allowing us to learn from it rather than hide it. The supply chain. A corporation cannot delete the record of a shipment from a factory known for child labour. The chain of custody is unbroken. Immutability turns history from a story told by the winner into a fact observed by all. Building the mirror. This part, the mirror of truth, is an instruction manual for building this specific machinery. We are going to walk into the workshop. We are going to strip away the vague promises of transparency and look at the hard engineering required to guarantee it. We will construct a machine with 3 non-negotiable components. 1. The sanctuary, the airlock, to filter the noise. 2. The journal, the immutable ledger, to lock the past. 3. The clockwork heart, the deterministic kernel, to replay the truth. The eraser is the tool of the manipulator. The immutable ledger is the tool of the citizen. It is time to secure the record. Chapter 2. The sanctuary. Walk into a high-frequency trading floor, or stand in a hospital ICU on a Friday night, or simply open a social media feed during a breaking news event. What do you feel? You feel the physical assault of noise. Lights are flashing, phones are pinging, numbers scroll across screens faster than the human eye can resolve. People shout conflicting information. Buy! Sell! The patient is crashing. It's a hoax. It's real. This is the state of the modern world. It is a fire hose of raw, chaotic, unfiltered data. If you try to drink from a fire hose, you do not get hydrated. You get knocked down. In our personal lives, this noise creates anxiety. But in our critical systems, our power grids, our supply chains, our governance, it creates systemic instability. If we allow raw, screaming noise to flow directly into our decision-making logic, we make mistakes. We react to false alarms. We miss the slow, quiet signals of real danger. To build a mirror of truth, we cannot just record everything. We must filter it. We need a way to calm the storm before it enters the house. We need an airlock, the architecture of the boundary. In the simplified architecture of a farmhouse, this is called a mudroom. It is the transition space where you take off your muddy boots so you don't destroy the white carpets inside. In the architecture of a high-integrity system, this is called an ingestion engine or an airlock. The airlock is the most critical defense we have against the chaos of reality. Its job is to mediate between two fundamentally different types of physics. 1. The outside, non-deterministic. This is the physical world. It is messy. Sensors glitch. Thermometers read 100 degrees 1 second and minus 50 the next because of a loose wire. Humans make typos. It is unpredictable. 2. The inside, deterministic. This is the world of this immutable ledger. Here, facts must be perfect, the timeline must be orderly, logic must be absolute. If you connect the outside directly to the inside without an airlock, you pollute the ledger. You fill the history books with glitches, you break the mirror. The intelligent doorman. The software that lives inside the airlock acts as an intelligent doorman. It listens to the noise outside. It hears the screaming sensors and the frantic market ticks. But it does not write them all down. It interrogates them using validation logic. The glitch. A temperature sensor in a nuclear plant spikes to critical levels for 0.1 seconds, then returns to normal. The reaction. Without an airlock, the system triggers an emergency shutdown, costing millions. The airlock. It sees the spike is physically impossible. Matter cannot heat and cool that fast. It flags it as noise. It discards the bad data the plant keeps running. The trend. The sensor reports a temperature rise of 1 degree every minute, steadily for 10 minutes. The airlock. It recognizes the geometry of a real event. It opens the door. It passes the data to the immutable ledger. This process is called signal processing. It transforms the noise of the world into the note of the record, sampling the rhythm. How does the doorman know the difference? It listens for the rhythm. In technical terms, this is about temporal resolution and hysteresis. The airlock adapts its listening speed to the context of the event. Noise. The valve is 10% open. No 11%, no 10.5%, no 9%. Signal. At 10 a.m., the valve stabilized at 10%. The airlock takes the continuous, messy, analog flow of reality and chops it up into neat, discrete digital packages. This translation is what saves us from drowning. It ensures that the immutable ledger, Chapter 1, is not filled with the trash of random variants, but with the gold of verified events. Defeating alert fatigue. Why does this matter to the Navigator? Because currently you are living in a house without a front door. You have notifications on your phone. You have work emails buzzing your wrist. You have the raw, muddy chaos of the global economy tracking dirt all over your mind. You are suffering from alert fatigue. When everything is an emergency, nothing is. When every data point screams for attention, you lose the ability to see the cliff edge. By demanding systems that use this airlock architecture, we are demanding sanity. We want a stock market that doesn't crash because of a single fake tweet. The airlock would verify the source before executing the trade. We want a medical monitor that doesn't beep every time a patient shifts in bed. The airlock would filter the motion artifact. We want a news feed that prioritizes verified structural change over transient rumors. The sanctuary gives us a place to think. It ensures that what gets written in our unbreaking journal, the history we rely on, is not just noise, but signal. Now that we have cleaned the data, we are ready to write it down. But we must be careful where we write it. We cannot write it on a blackboard. We need a book that lasts forever. Chapter 3. The Unbreaking Journal. In the maritime tradition of the 19th century, the captain's log was not merely a diary, it was a legal instrument. Maritime law was explicit. The logbook had to be bound, the pages were numbered, and most importantly, the captain was forbidden from removing a page. If he made a mistake, writing heading north when he meant heading south, he could not erase it. He could not scribble over it until it was unreadable. He had to draw a single line through the error, write the correction next to it, and initial it. Why? Because if the ship ran aground, the investigators needed to analyze the cognitive trajectory of the disaster. They needed to see that the captain was confused at 2 a.m., corrected himself at 2:05 a.m., and panicked at 2:10 a.m. If the captain could tear out the page and write a clean, error-free version of the night, the truth of the crash would be lost to the ocean. Today, we have abandoned the captain's log. We have replaced it with the whiteboard. We have built a civilization on systems that are designed to forget. The snapshot trap. Most modern computer databases do not keep a history. They keep a snapshot. Imagine you log into your bank account and see balance $500. That number is a snapshot of the state of your account right now. It does not tell you that yesterday you had $1,000. It does not tell you that an hour ago you had $50,000 because of a bank error that was quietly reversed before you logged in. This architecture is called mutable state. To update your balance from $1,000 to $500, the computer physically deletes the old number from the hard drive and writes the new number in its place. This is the snapshot trap. It is the technological equivalent of burning a letter after you read it. By destroying the previous state to create the current state, we sever the chain of causality. When the system breaks, we are left staring at the wreckage, the final balance, with zero evidence of the sequence of events that caused the crash. The law of the ledger. To build a mirror of truth, we must reject mutable state. We must return to the discipline of the captain's log. We call this the immutable ledger. The engineering rule of the ledger is absolute, append only. You can only add. You can never delete. In an immutable ledger, your bank account is not a single number. It is a list of events. Line 1, account opened, $0. Line 2, paycheck deposited, plus $1,000. Line 3, rent paid, $500. Line 4, correction. Rent check bounced, plus $500. To find your balance, the system doesn't look at a static number. It replays the history. It sums the events. This distinction is not semantic. It is structural. In a snapshot system, the correction, line 4, would simply erase the error, line 3. The bounce would vanish from history. In a ledger system, the bounce is preserved. The mistake is part of the record. Context is causality. Why does this technical architecture matter to your family, your city, or your democracy? Because context is causality. You cannot understand why a system failed if you only see the result. You need to see the sequence. Consider a bridge collapse. The snapshot view. The investigator looks at the database. The record shows the bridge was built with grade B steel. The engineer signed off on it. Conclusion. The engineer was incompetent. Blame the engineer. The immutable ledger. View. The investigator looks at the full sequence of the events. 1. Event A. Engineer specifies grade A steel, high safety. 2. Event B. Budget committee enters, budget cut minus 20%. 3. Event C. Procurement manager calculates grade A is now over budget. 4. Event D. Procurement. Manager switches orders to grade B steel. 5. Event E. Bridge collapses. The ledger reveals the truth. The engineer was competent. The budget cut caused the switch. The collapse was a financial failure, not a structural one. Without the ledger, the budget committee can deny involvement. They can say, "We never told them to use bad steel." And if they control the database, they can ensure the record supports them. But with an immutable ledger, the budget cut event is carved in digital stone. It is linked causally to the switch in steel. Radical accountability. This is the ultimate promise of the Navigator's tools. The immutable ledger enforces radical accountability. It removes the eraser from the hands of the powerful. The billing dispute. The company cannot claim you didn't pay if the payment event is hashed into the ledger. The political promise. A politician cannot scrub a failed policy from their website archives. The original pledge is line 402 and the reversal is line 805. The contradiction is visible. We are moving from a world of he said, she said, to a world of the chain proves. Now we have a clean signal from the airlock in chapter 2 and a perfect memory from the ledger in chapter 3. We have preserved the past. But preserving the past is only useful if we can learn from it. We need a way to take this perfect list of events and bring it back to life. We need to watch the bridge collapse again, in slow motion, to see exactly how the steel failed. We need the clockwork heart. Chapter 4. The clockwork heart. Have you ever argued with a computer? You know the scenario. You call tech support because a program crashed, a file vanished, or a calculation looks wrong. And the support agent says the most frustrating phrase in the English language. Well, it works on my machine. They try to recreate your problem, but they can't. On their screen, everything is fine. On your screen, everything is broken. It is a digital version of he said, she said. This happens because most modern software is non-deterministic. It relies on luck. It checks the clock on the wall. It reads a random number generator. It waits for a network signal that might be slow. It is chaotic. If you run the exact same program twice, you might get two slightly different results. In a video game, a glitch is annoying. In a court of law, a hospital, or a global supply chain, a glitch is a tragedy. If we want to build a mirror of truth, a system that protects us from gaslighting, we cannot accept luck. We cannot accept systems that work most of the time. We need a machine that works exactly the same way every single time, forever. We need a clockwork heart, the discipline of the metronome. Musicians know that to keep 100 people playing together, you need a unifying constraint. You need a metronome. Tick, tick, tick. It never speeds up. It never slows down. It is absolute. To build a trustworthy system, we need a similar constraint. In computer science, this is called the deterministic kernel. Think of the kernel as the engine of our navigator. It takes an entry from our immutable ledger, chapter 3. It processes it using a strict set of rules. It produces a result. The rule of the kernel is absolute. Given the same input, the ledger, it must produce the exact same output, the reality. It doesn't matter if you run the simulation today, next year, or in a century. It doesn't matter if you run it on a supercomputer or a dusty laptop, the result must be identical down to the last decimal point. This sounds simple, but it is incredibly hard to engineer. It requires us to strip away the magic of modern software. The kernel is forbidden from guessing. It is forbidden from checking the time of day. It is forbidden from rolling dice. It must be pure crystalline logic. The power of instant replay. Why does this technical discipline matter to you? Because when you combine the immutable ledger, perfect memory, with the deterministic kernel, perfect processing, you unlock a superpower, time travel. In professional sports, when there is a controversial call, did the ball cross the line? We pause the game. We rewind the tape. We watch the instant replay. We can see exactly what happened because the camera recorded the truth. But in the economy or in governance, we don't have cameras everywhere. We have complex, invisible systems. If the stock market crashes, we want to know why. If a pandemic response fails, we want to know where the logistics broke. With a deterministic kernel, we can reload the ledger from yesterday morning. We can press play, and the kernel will replay the reality exactly as it happened. We can watch the disaster unfold in slow motion. We can see the exact moment the bank failed. We can see the exact decision that triggered the supply shortage. Because the heart is deterministic, we know that what we are watching is not a simulation or a guess. It is a mathematical reconstruction of the past. Fairness requires precision. This is the ultimate tool for justice. Justice requires that we agree on reality. If my computer says you owe $500 and your computer says you owe $0, we fight. We waste resources on lawyers and auditors. But if we both share the same ledger and run it through the same deterministic kernel, we share the same truth. We cannot disagree because the math does not allow for opinion. The insurance claim. You don't have to argue about who hit whom. The sensor data plays back through the kernel, reconstructing the physics of the crash. The tax audit. The government can't claim you underpaid if the ledger proves the transaction flow. The clockwork heart removes the ambiguity. It strips away the spin. It leaves us with the cold, hard, beautiful mechanics of cause and effect. The mirror is complete. We have now finished building the machine. 1. The airlock. Chapter 2. Cleans the noise so we can think. 2. The immutable ledger. Chapter 3. Locks the past so we can't be gaslit. 3. The deterministic kernel. Chapter 4. Replays the truth so we can understand. We have built a mirror of truth. It is a tool of immense power. It gives us the ability to look at our world and see it exactly as it is, without the distortion of bias or the fog of forgotten history. But a mirror is passive. It only shows you what has happened. To change the world, we need to see what could happen. We need to step through the looking glass. In the next part, the library of tomorrows, we will take this machine and turn it forward. We will learn how to use it not just to replay the past, but to rehearse the future. We will learn how to improvise. End of part 2. Part 3, the library of tomorrows. Chapter 1, the one-way street. Elena wanted to save her town. She was the newly elected mayor of a mid-sized industrial city that was slowly suffocating. The downtown was grey, the storefronts were shuttered, and the young people were leaving for the coast. So, she did exactly what the urban planning textbooks told her to do. She gathered the best architects. They designed a beautiful pedestrian plaza. They would close 3 blocks of Main Street to cars, plant oak trees, install cobblestones, and create a vibrant space for cafes and markets. The data was linear and promising. Remove cars, increase foot traffic, revitalize economy. Elena signed the order. The concrete was poured. The ribbon was cut. 6 months later, the plaza was beautiful. It was also a graveyard. The cafes Elena had subsidized were bankrupt. The remaining shops on the periphery were closing. The traffic in the city wasn't just bad, it was apocalyptic. Elena hadn't missed a meeting. She hadn't missed a budget line. What she had missed was an invisible, nonlinear connection. By closing Main Street, she had unwittingly forced heavy delivery trucks onto a narrow side road. That side road passed the local elementary school. To keep the children safe from the 18-wheelers, the crossing guards began stopping traffic every 5 minutes. This created a gridlock that backed up to the highway off-ramp. Commuters, frustrated by the daily 20-minute delay, stopped coming downtown entirely. They drove to the mall on the outskirts instead. Elena lost the next election. She had tried to fix the system, but she broke it instead. She was punished by the law of unintended consequences, the tangled web. We usually tell stories like Elena's to illustrate incompetence. We say, she should have known better. But this is a lie we tell ourselves to feel safe. Elena could not have known better. She was using a linear tool, a blueprint of Main Street to fix a complex system, a living city. In a complex system, everything is tightly coupled. The road is connected to the school is connected to the traffic is connected to the mall is connected to the tax base. You cannot touch one part of the web without vibrating the entire structure. The human brain, evolved to track linear threats like predators, is terrible at calculating these second-order effects. We are brilliant at first-order thinking, close road, nice park. We are blind to third-order thinking, close road, bankrupt cafe. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is a failure of bandwidth. The complexity of modern civilization has surpassed the cognitive capacity of the unaided human mind. The tyranny of time. The tragedy of Elena's story is not that she made a mistake on. The tragedy is that she could not fix it. We live on a one-way street. In the physical world, time's arrow moves in only one direction. You cannot unpour the concrete. You cannot unbankrupt the shop. You cannot undeploy the troops. Every decision we make is a gamble with irreversible stakes. The CEO. If she changes the pricing model and customers revolt, she cannot C CRL plus C the revenue loss. The doctor. If she prescribes a drug that interacts poorly with the patient's genetics, she cannot undo the ingestion. Because the cost of being wrong is so high, and because the web is so tangled, we have developed a societal coping mechanism. Paralysis. We stop taking risks. We stick to the status quo, even when we know it is failing, because the status quo is known. We fear innovation because innovation requires change, and change carries the risk of the one-way street. We are terrified of breaking things, so we fix nothing. The missing sandbox. Watch a child playing with blocks. She builds a tower. It wobbles. She adds one more block. It crashes. Does the child resign? Does she face a lawsuit? Does she lose her job? No. She laughs. She rebuilds. She tries a wider base. She learns the physics of gravity through failure. She is learning in a sandbox, a protected environment where the laws of physics apply, but the consequences do not. As adults, we have lost our sandbox. We are playing with real blocks, real money, real infrastructure, real lives. We cannot afford to let the tower crash. But what if we could? What if Elena could have verified the future before it became the present? What if she could have stood in a room, pressed a button, and watched a simulation of her city run forward in time? She would have seen the trucks turn. She would have seen the gridlock form at the school. She would have seen the red ink on the shop ledgers. She would have seen the crash before she poured the concrete. And then she would have pressed reset. She would have tweaked the plan, reroute trucks to Fifth Avenue. She would have run the simulation again. She would have solved the problem in the library, not on the street. From gambling to engineering, this is the promise of the library of tomorrows. It is the ability to take the immutable ledger, our perfect memory of the past, and the causal engine, our processor of physics, and use them to project a multiverse of possibilities. It allows us to escape the tyranny of the one-way street. It gives us a rehearsal room for reality. To solve the wicked problems of our time, climate change, inequality, fragile supply chains, we need to be bold. We need to experiment. But we cannot ethically experiment on live populations. We need a place where it is safe to fail. In the next chapter, we will turn on the machine. We will look at the time machine not as a sci-fi fantasy, but as a practical tool for debugging the future. Chapter 2. The Time Machine. In the high-stakes world of professional sports, when a play goes wrong, a quarterback throws an interception, or a striker misses a goal, the team does not simply move on. The next day, they sit in a dark room. They turn on a projector. They watch the game tape. They rewind the mistake. They play it in slow motion. They watch the quarterback's feet. They watch the defender's eyes. They do not do this to shame the quarterback. They do it to understand the mechanics of failure. "Ah," the coach says, pointing to the screen. "You see? The defender shifted his weight to the left. That was the signal. You reacted correctly to the signal, but the signal was a trap." Because they can replay the past, they can decouple the outcome, the interception, from the intent, the throw. They can turn a disaster into data. Now, imagine if Eleanor, the mayor from Chapter 1, could do this. Imagine if, after the traffic gridlock paralysed her city, she could walk into a room, press a button, and watch the last 6 months of her city's life replay on a screen. She could zoom in on the intersection by the school. She could see exactly the moment the first truck blocked the crossing guard. She wouldn't just see that it failed. She would see why it failed. The engineering of recall. In science fiction, a time machine is a magic box. In the causal engine, it is a mathematical equation. In Part 2, we built 2 specific components. 1. The immutable ledger. A perfect, unchangeable record of every input. Chapter 3. 2. The deterministic. Kernel. A processor that runs exactly the same way every time. Chapter 4. When you combine these two, you achieve computational time travel. Because the ledger remembers every single input, the cars, the traffic light timing, the weather, and the kernel processes them without flakiness or random guessing. We can literally reload the reality of the city as it existed last Tuesday at 8 a.m. We can scrub the timeline back and forth like a video editor. The crash investigation. Instead of guessing why the stock market crashed, regulators can replay the trading day, millisecond by millisecond. They can watch the cascading sell orders trigger each other like dominoes. The supply chain. Break. A logistics manager can rewind to see exactly where the shipment of microchips got stuck. Was it the storm in Taiwan or the strike in Los Angeles? The replay shows the truth. This is not a simulation of what might have happened. Because the ledger is immutable, this is a reconstruction of what did happen. from blame to understanding. This technical capability profoundly shifts the emotional texture of leadership. Currently, when complex systems break, our first instinct is scapegoating. We ask, who messed up? We fire the mayor. We sue the doctor. We assume the failure was caused by individual incompetence or malice. But as we saw with Eleanor, failure is usually caused by complexity. The time machine allows us to move from blame to understanding. When we replay the tape of the traffic jam, we see that the truck driver didn't make a bad choice. He turned down the side street because the main road was closed. We see that the crossing guard didn't cause gridlock. She stopped traffic to save a child. Every actor was behaving rationally. The system was broken. This realization allows for a new kind of political and corporate kindness. It allows us to say, I see why you did that. Given the data you had at 8 a.m., it was the right call. But now, seeing the replay, we understand that at 8:05 a.m., the system coupling caused a fracture. We stop firing the pilots and start fixing the planes. The power of the pause. The most underrated feature of this machine is not the rewind. It is the pause. In the real world, the one-way street, crises happen at velocity. The market is crashing now. The floodwaters are rising now. You do not have time to think. You only have time to react. Panic sets in. Adrenaline hijacks the brain. In this state, we make poor, short-term decisions. With the causal engine, we can pause the crisis. We can freeze the simulation right at the moment the traffic jam starts. We can look around. We can check the data layers. We can take a breath. We can stop the chaotic rush of time and introduce the one thing that solves problems better than anything else: stillness. We have reclaimed the past, the ledger. We have understood the failure, the replay. We have paused the chaos, the stillness. Now, we are finally ready to fix it. We are ready to stop looking backward and start looking forward. We are ready to use the engine not just to replay what happened, but to see what could happen if we changed the inputs. We are ready for the jam session. Chapter 3. The jam session. Jazz musicians have a saying: there are no wrong notes, only wrong resolutions. When a jazz band is improvising, they're constantly running real-time experiments. The trumpet player might try a wild dissonant note. In a rigid system, that note would be a mistake, but in a jazz club, the piano player hears it, accepts it, and builds a chord around it that resolves the dissonance into a new melody. They are engaging in a jam session. They are testing the future in real time. In the physical world, the world of concrete, traffic, and budgets, we rarely get to jam. We are forced to play the sheet music exactly as written. If a mayor or a CEO tries to improvise with the city budget, they risk crashing the economy. Because reality is a one-way street, every wrong note is permanent. But now that we have the causal engine, part 2, and the pause button, chapter 2, we can change the rules of the venue. We can turn the mayor's office, the boardroom, or the kitchen table into a jazz club. We can create a space where wrong notes are not fatal. The fork in the road. Let's return to Eleanor, our mayor. She is sitting in the rehearsal room. She has paused the simulation of her city right at the moment the traffic jam began. On the screen, the trucks are frozen in gridlock. The timeline is stopped. She wants to fix it. In the old world, she would have to guess. She might say, let's build a bypass road. That costs millions and takes 2 years. If she is wrong, she ruins the city budget forever. But here, she does something different. She looks at the timeline of her city and she creates a branch. In software engineering, branching is what you do when you want to test code without breaking the main program. You create a copy of the world. 1. The main branch, reality A. The historical record, the traffic is jammed, the shops are failing. 2. The ghost branch, reality B. A perfect digital copy of the city that exists only inside the engine. In reality, A. Elena is bound by the laws of history. In reality, B. She is a god. She can change the physics, she can change the past. The synthetic event. Elena has an idea. What if, she thinks, we didn't build up a new road? What if we just changed the logic of the traffic lights on 4th Street to prioritize heavy trucks? She types this command into the engine. In data science, this is called a synthetic event. It is a fake fact. It is an event that never happened in the real world, but the engine treats it as absolute truth within the simulation. She inserts this synthetic event into reality B at timestamp 8 a.m. Then she presses play. The deterministic kernel picks up the new fact. It sees the trucks approaching the light, but this time the light turns green. The physics engine calculates the new momentum. The trucks do not stop. They do not block the school. Elena watches the screen. In reality B, the gridlock never forms. The wrong note resolves into a harmony. Okay, she says, that works, but what if we also incentivized night deliveries? She creates reality C. She keeps the traffic light change from reality B and adds a tax incentive for night driving. She presses play. In reality C, the trucks disappear from the day shift entirely. The plaza is quiet. The air quality improves. Exploring the state space. This is the mechanics of creativity. Elena is not limited to one guess. She can spawn a dozen different futures. Reality D, reroute trucks to the highway. Result, cost too much fuel. Trucking companies revolt. Reality E. Charge a toll for the downtown zone. Result, traffic clears, but local shops lose 20% of revenue. Reality F. Turn the plaza into a one-way street. Result, confusion, accident rates, spike. She is exploring the state space of her city. She is testing the dangerous ideas, the expensive ideas, and the crazy ideas. She is crashing the car in the simulator over and over again. She is bankrupting the city in reality E, so she can save it in reality C. She's filtering out the noise of bad ideas before they ever touch the real world. From anxiety to agency. Notice the shift in Elena's psychology. At the start of part 3, she was paralyzed. She was a victim of the one-way street, afraid to touch the system because she knew that complexity would punish her. Her anxiety came from a lack of control. Now, she is playing. She is curious. What happens if I try this? The causal engine has removed the risk from innovation. It has given her a sandbox. This is how we solve the wicked problems of our time. We do not solve them by arguing ideology in a conference room. We solve them by simulating counterfactuals. We create a library of possible tomorrows. We read the endings of all of them, and then, and only then, we choose which book we want to live in. But Elena now faces a new problem. She has generated 50 different versions of the future. In version 12, the traffic is gone, but the shops are broke. In version 33, the shops are rich, but the air is toxic. She is staring at 50 spreadsheets, drowning in data once again. She has the freedom to experiment, but she lacks the clarity to choose. How does she weigh clean air against fast ambulances? She doesn't need a spreadsheet, she needs a map. Chapter 4. The Map of Consequences. Elena now faced a new, sophisticated problem. In the jam session of Chapter 3, She had successfully used the causal engine to spawn 50 different versions of her city's future. In version 12, she solved the traffic, but the local shops went bankrupt within 6 months. In version 24, the shops thrived, but air pollution levels spiked, triggering a federal fine. In version 33, the traffic flowed and the air was clean, but the ambulance response time to the suburbs increased by 3 minutes, a fatal delay. She was staring at 50 screens. She was drowning in thousands of columns of data, revenue projections, carbon monoxide parts per million, decibel readings, and foot traffic counts. She had escaped the paralysis of the one-way street, only to be trapped in the paralysis of abundance. She had the freedom to experiment, but she lacked the clarity to choose. How do you weigh clean air against fast ambulances? How do you compare happy parents against angry truck drivers? In a linear world, you would try to average them out. In a complex world, averaging destroys the truth. Elena didn't need a spreadsheet. She needed a map, visualizing the state space. The causal engine has one final superpower. It honors the manifold hypothesis we discussed in part 1. It understands that reality has a shape. It takes those millions of disconnected data points, the traffic, the money, the pollution, the health outcomes, and fuses them into a single 3-dimensional landscape. In data science, this is called visualizing the state space to Eleanor. It simply looks like a terrain. The smooth valley. This represents a stable, low-friction system. Here, the relationships between the school, the road, and the shops are harmonious. The system is at rest. The jagged mountain. This represents stress. It means the system is straining. The traffic might be moving, but the drivers are furious and the pavement is degrading. The energy cost of maintaining this state is high. The cliff edge. This is the danger zone. It represents a tipping point. It means the system is about to break, a strike, a riot, or a total economic collapse. The navigator's view. Elena looks at her 50 simulations, not as lists of numbers, but as paths across this landscape. She sees that version 12, where the shops go bankrupt, drives the city straight toward a cliff edge. The traffic numbers look good for 3 months, but then the economic collapse creates a structural hole in the terrain. It is a dead end. She sees that version 33, slow ambulances, looks smooth at first, but it climbs a steep, jagged mountain of risk. The friction is too high. Eventually, the system will slide back down. But then she sees version 41. In this version, she didn't just change the lights. She routed the trucks to a loading zone behind the supermarket and incentivized off-peak deliveries, a complex multivariable solution. On the screen, the path for version 41 glows. It winds through the valley. It avoids the high-stress mountains. It stays far away from the cliffs of failure. It is the geodesic path. In geometry, a geodesic is the shortest path between 2 points on a curved surface. In systems engineering, it is the path of least resistance. It is the solution that works with the physics of the system, not against them. She doesn't need to be a mathematician to see it. It looks balanced. It looks stable. Choosing the future. This is the ultimate utility of the Library of Tomorrows. It gives us a map of consequences. Before the causal engine, we chose our future based on rhetoric. We chose the plan that sounded the best in a speech, or the one that was cheapest in the short term. We navigated by darkness. Now, we navigate by sight. We choose the plan that traces the geodesic path. Elena stands up. She turns off the simulation. She picks up the phone to call the city council. She doesn't say, "I have a theory." She says, "I have mapped the route. I know how to get us home." She has transformed from a politician guessing at solutions into a navigator steering through complexity. The limit of the machine. We have come a long way in this series. 1. Part 1 gave us the signal to detect the storm. 2. Part 2 gave us the mirror to preserve the truth. 3. Part 3 gave us the map to explore the possible futures. We have the safety, we have the clarity, we have the capability. But as Eleanor looks at the map, she realizes there is one question the machine cannot answer. The causal engine can show her the path to any destination. If she asks it how to maximize profit at the expense of human misery, it will draw a perfect geodesic path to that outcome. If she asks it how to maximize control and surveillance, it will map that route too. The machine is a neutral servant. It handles the physics, the how. It cannot handle the ethics, the why. If we want to build a world that is not just efficient but kind, a world of delight, we need to talk about the destination. We need to talk about how we, the humans, remain the conductors of this great orchestra. That is the story of our final part, the unfinished symphony. End of part 3. Part 4, the unfinished symphony. Chapter 1, the conductor's baton. There is a nightmare that haunts the modern consciousness. It is the nightmare of the black box. In this nightmare, you apply for a mortgage to buy your first home. 2 milliseconds later, a computer denies you. You ask why. The bank teller shrugs. The algorithm decided, they say. We don't know the specific variables. It just knows best. In this nightmare, a hospital computer denies a life-saving surgery because the statistical probability of success is 0.5% below the cost-benefit threshold. We fear that we're building our own replacements. We look at the speed and predictive power of the causal engine and we feel small. We worry that, in a world of self-correcting systems and optimized geodesic paths, there is no place left for the slow, messy biological work of being human. We fear that in the orchestra of the future, there is no chair for us. This fear is understandable, but it is based on a fundamental category error. It confuses intelligence, the ability to process information, with desire, the ability to want a result. The hollow machine. To understand your role in the future, you must understand the limitations of the instrument. A causal engine, no matter how advanced, is hollow. It possesses physics. It possesses logic. It possesses the ability to calculate the geodesic path through a million-dimensional manifold. But it has no hunger. It does not care if it lives or dies. It does not care if the sun rises or sets. It feels no grief when a bridge collapses, and no joy when a child recovers from illness. It is a Stradivarius violin. A Stradivarius is a masterpiece of engineering. It can produce sounds that make grown men weep. But if you leave it in a case for 100 years, it will produce nothing but silence. It has no song of its own. The machine can calculate the how. It can never calculate the why, the responsibility gap. The danger of the future is not that the machine will take control. The danger is that we will give it up. We are cognitively lazy. When we have a machine that can process complexity better than we can, it is tempting to say, the engine knows the market, let it decide who gets the loan. It is tempting to say, the engine knows the traffic flow, let it decide which neighborhood gets the highway. When we do this, we create a responsibility gap. If the engine routes traffic through a quiet neighborhood, destroying the peace of 1,000 families to save commuters 3 minutes, who is to blame? You cannot blame the engine. It was simply optimizing for efficiency. It followed the laws of physics. You cannot blame the commuters. They just drove where the lights told them to. The blame belongs to the person who put down the baton. The blame belongs to the leader who mistook optimization for wisdom. Meaningful human control. To build a Navigator society, a society that is both high-tech and high humanity, we must enforce a strict architectural rule. Meaningful human control. In the context of autonomous weapons systems, the United Nations defines meaningful human control as the requirement that a human must always be the one to initiate the release of force. In our context, it means something broader. It means that the human must always set the objective function. The engine's job to find the geodesic path, the most efficient route to the destination. The human's job to choose the destination. Scenario A. Engine, optimize the city for maximum tax revenue. Result, high fees, aggressive parking enforcement, gentrification. Scenario B. Engine, optimize the city for maximum child safety and small business retention. Result, protected bike lanes, subsidies for local shops. The engine is capable of executing either plan with perfect precision. It does not care which one you choose. It waits in silence for the input. The return of the conductor. This effectively promotes the human from the back of the orchestra, playing the notes, to the podium, conducting the score. A conductor does not blow the trumpet. They do not beat the drum. They do not make a sound. To a naive observer, they appear to be doing nothing but waving a stick. Yet, they are the most important person in the room. They set the tempo. They set the dynamics. They decide if the piece is a tragedy or a triumph. They hold the emotional architecture of the symphony in their mind, and they use the instruments to manifest it. The causal engine amplifies human intent 1,000 times over. If our intent is greedy, the engine will make us monsters of efficiency. If our intent is indifferent, the engine will create a bureaucratic hell. But if our intent is kind, the engine will give us the power to scale kindness to the level of a civilization. We are not being replaced. We are being asked to step up. We are being asked to define with mathematical precision what we actually care about. The baton is waiting. In the next chapter, we will learn how to use it. We will learn that a system cannot just be set once and forgotten. It must be constantly tuned to the changing resonance of the world. We will learn the art of resilience. Chapter 2. Tuning the orchestra. A violin is a living thing. It is made of wood, glue, and tension. When the humidity rises, the wood swells. When the temperature drops, the strings tighten. If a master violinist tunes their instrument in a warm dressing room and then walks out onto a cold stage, the instrument will physically change. It will go out of tune. It doesn't matter how perfect the Stradivarius is. It doesn't matter how expensive the strings are. The environment is dynamic. If the violinist plays the concerto with their fingers in the exact same positions they used in the dressing room, the music will sound sour. It will be dissonant. To make beautiful music, the musician must engage in a constant, invisible act of correction. They listen. They hear the pitch drift by a fraction of a hertz. They slide their finger a millimeter up the string. They tune in real time. This ability to adapt to a changing environment is what makes music possible. And the inability to adapt is what makes our modern systems fail. The brittle world. We have built a civilization based on static blueprints. We build a power grid designed for the weather patterns of 1990. When the heat waves of the 2020s hit, the grid fails because the physical wires sag and the demand spikes beyond the blueprint's max load. We build a supply chain designed for peacetime efficiency. When a geopolitical conflict breaks out in a critical shipping lane, the chain snaps because it has no slack. We are like a violinist who refuses to move their finger. We are playing the old notes in a new world, and we are wondering why the symphony sounds like a car crash. In systems engineering, this is called the simulation gap. The simulation gap is the distance between the map, what the computer thinks is happening, and the territory, what is actually happening. In a static system, this gap grows wider every day until the system collapses. The listening engine. The causal engine introduces a new capability that static blueprints lack. It doesn't just play the score, it listens to the room. This feature is called the refinement loop. Imagine the engine is running a simulation of the city's power grid. 1. Prediction. The engine calculates. At 2 p.m., the voltage on line A will be 100%. 2. Observation. At 2 p.m., the airlock, part 2, reports that the actual voltage is 98%. 3. The gap. There is a 2% variance. A dumb machine ignores the gap. It insists its math is right and the world is wrong. A self-correcting machine asks, why? It looks at the environmental data. It realizes, the outside temperature is 5 degrees hotter than the forecast. The resistance in the wires has changed. Then it does something magical. It rewrites its own internal physics. It updates the resistance variable for every wire in the simulation. It tunes itself. It slides its finger up the string. Resilience, not strength. This shifts our fundamental definition of safety. For the last century, we believed that safety equaled strength. We built thicker walls, higher levees, and stronger cables. We tried to build things that could not break. But in a nonlinear world, the storm is always stronger than the wall. Eventually, the levee breaches, and when a strong system fails, it fails catastrophically. The causal engine allows us to move from strength to resilience. Resilience is the ability to bend without breaking. It is the reed in the wind. The grid. When a storm knocks out a main power line, the self-correcting engine doesn't try to force power through the broken cable. It instantly resimulates the network and reroutes power through 1,000 smaller, local paths to keep the lights on. The market. When a shortage hits a specific commodity, the engine adjusts the pricing physics to smooth out demand before the shelves go empty. The system survives not because it is rigid, but because it is fluid. Drift and tune. Currently, our society operates on a cycle of crash and fix one. We wait for the system to break, the crash. 2. We panic and scramble to repair it, the fix. 3. We wait for the next break. This cycle is the source of our collective anxiety. We are always waiting for the other shoe to drop. The self-correcting world offers a different rhythm, drift and tune. The system drifts because the world changes. The engine tunes, corrects the model. The harmony holds. We don't have to be afraid of the changing weather anymore. We don't have to fear the unexpected shock, because we know that our instruments are listening and they know how to stay in tune with reality. We have secured the safety of the system. We have handed the baton to the conductor, Chapter 1, and we have taught the orchestra to listen, Chapter 2. Now, we can ask the final, most beautiful question. If we can tune the world for anything, what song do we actually want to play? We have spent decades optimizing for profit, but the causal engine is agnostic. It can optimize for anything. In the next chapter, we will explore the geometry of delight. Chapter 3. The geometry of delight. Walk through a modern international airport. It is a marvel of civil engineering. It moves millions of people and tons of cargo with clockwork precision. It is safe. It is incredibly efficient. The algorithms running the logistics are optimized to get planes in the air and bags on the belt with the absolute minimum amount of fuel and time. And yet, being there is often a miserable experience. The seats are too small, the air is stale, the food is processed, the lighting is harsh, the experience is dehumanizing. Why? Because the objective function of the airport is efficiency. In systems engineering, an objective function is the mathematical goal you give to an optimizer. For the last 50 years, we have given our systems very simple, single variable instructions. Minimize cost or maximize speed. The algorithms did exactly what they were told. They optimized the humanity right out of the system. They found the most efficient way to move biomass, passengers, through a tube. Now, we have the causal engine. It is the ultimate optimizer. If we tell it to maximize efficiency, it will make the airport seats even smaller. It will make the hospital visits even shorter. It will create a perfectly efficient hell. But what if we gave it a different instruction? What if we told it to optimize for delight? The curse of the single variable. The tragedy of the 20th century was the obsession with the single variable. Corporate farming optimized for yield. Result, massive food production, but soil depletion and fertilizer runoff. Social media. Optimized for engagement. Result, massive ad revenue, but polarized societies and teen depression. Healthcare. Optimized for throughput. Result, short wait times, but doctor burnout and patient alienation. When you optimize a complex system for only one variable, you inevitably break the others. You create a paperclip maximizer that destroys everything else to achieve its one narrow goal. Multi-objective optimization. To fix this, we do not need to abandon math. We need better math. We need multi-objective optimization. This is the capability of the causal engine to solve for multiple contradictory goals at the same time. Imagine we are writing the score for a new city logistics plan. The old score, maximize delivery speed. The new score, maximize delivery speed, but keep employee burnout below 5% and ensure customer satisfaction is above 90% and minimize carbon emissions. This is a much harder math problem. The engine looks at the landscape, the manifold from part 3. It sees that the path of fastest speed drives employee burnout to 20%. That path is now forbidden. It must find the Pareto frontier. This is the specific curve on the map where you have balanced the competing needs perfectly, where you cannot make the delivery any faster without hurting the driver, and you cannot help the driver without slowing the delivery. Finding this balance point requires massive computational power. A human brain cannot calculate the trade-offs between 50 variables in real time, but the causal engine can. It finds the geometry of delight, measuring the invisible. The skeptic asks, profit is a number, speed is a number. How do you put delight into an equation? This brings us back to the geometry of intelligence, part 1. We can measure delight, we just haven't tried. Biometrics. We can measure stress, cortisol levels, or calm, heart rate variability. Social graphs. We can measure connectivity. Do neighbours talk to each other? Environmental data. We can measure the acoustic ecology of a hospital. Is it quiet enough to heal? When we feed these metrics into the causal engine via the airlock, part 2, they become part of the optimization geometry. Imagine the engine simulating a new city park. Scenario A, a concrete slab, cheap to build, low maintenance, high efficiency, low delight. Scenario B, a lush garden with winding paths, expensive to build, hard to maintain, low efficiency, high delight. A single variable system picks A, but a multi-objective system sees that scenario B reduces local crime, improves mental health, and increases the property value of the surrounding homes. It sees that delight creates a ripple effect of value that the spreadsheet missed. It chooses the garden, not because it is sentimental, but because the math proves it is the robust solution. The compassion of constraints. This leads to a startling conclusion. We can use mathematics to enforce kindness. We can bake our values into the bedrock of the system. We can make it mathematically impossible for the system to be cruel. In optimization theory, there is a difference between a goal and a constraint. A goal is something you try to reach. A constraint is a hard wall you cannot cross. We can set compassion as a constraint. Debt collection. Maximize recovery subject to the constraint that the debtor's predicted liquidity never falls below the poverty line. The engine will find a payment plan that works rather than seizing the family car. Logistics. Deliver the packages, subject to the constraint that no truck routes past a school during recess. We stop relying on the goodwill of corporations or the ethics of individual managers, both of which bow to pressure. We rely on the hard boundaries of the engine. A world that likes you. Imagine waking up in a world optimized by this geometry. The traffic lights prioritize flow, not just volume, so you aren't stuck idling. The city air is clean because the grid optimized for wind power overnight. The notification on your phone is helpful, not distracting, because the algorithm is optimized for your well-being, not your time on device. It wouldn't look like a sci-fi utopia. It would look like normal life, just easier, softer. The friction would be gone. The doomy vibration would be replaced by the hum of functioning harmony. This is the world we can build. The instruments, ledger, airlock kernel are ready. The engine is waiting for the score. It is time for us to pick up the pen and write a song that is worth playing. Chapter 4. The New Common Sense. Imagine it is 20 years from now. You wake up in the morning, you turn on the tap, clear, clean water flows out. You do not wonder if the treatment plant is working. You do not check social media to see if there is a boil water advisory. You just drink. You check your bank app. The balance is exactly what you expected. There are no hidden fees, no surprise charges, no glitches. The history of your money is solid rock. You do not feel that familiar knot of anxiety in your stomach, the fear that a clerical error could ruin your month. You walk outside, the air is clear. The bus arrives exactly when the sign says it will. The city feels calm. In this future, nobody talks about causal engines. Nobody talks about immutable ledgers or deterministic kernels. Just as nobody today talks about alternating current when they turn on a lamp. We just call it electricity. It is boring. It is invisible. It just works. This is the destination we have been navigating toward. A future where the technology disappears and all that is left is trust, the conversation with the future. In this future, young people will ask us about the old days, the 2020s. They will look at us with the same confusion we feel when we look at medieval doctors who didn't wash their hands. They will ask, is it true that banks used to just delete transaction errors and you couldn't prove it? We will say, yes. They will ask, Is it true that governments would pass massive laws without simulating the second-order effects first? Did they really just guess? We will say, yes, we called it politics. They will ask, is it true that you lived with a constant, low-grade vibration of fear that the systems around you were about to collapse? And we will have to tell them, yes, we lived in the dark age of data. We had the information, but we didn't have the tools to understand it. We were passengers on a plane flying through a storm, and the pilots were blind. They will look at us with pity, because to them, the Navigator's toolkit is not radical technology. It is just common sense. Why wouldn't you simulate a law before passing it? Why wouldn't you optimize a city for delight? Why wouldn't you demand a journal that cannot be erased? To them, a mutable database will seem as dangerous and negligent as a car without seatbelts. The definition of agency, the profound shift in this future, is not technological, it is psychological. Throughout this series, we have talked about anxiety. Anxiety is a specific cognitive state. It is the feeling of having responsibility without control. You are responsible for your family's safety, but you cannot control the economy. You are responsible for your health, but you cannot control the polluted air. The causal engine flips this equation. It gives us agency. Agency is the knowledge that if something breaks, you have the tools to understand why and the capacity to fix it. When you know the bank can't cheat you because of the ledger, you stop hoarding cash. When you know the supply chain can self-correct because of the refinement loop, you stop panic buying. When you know the grid is resilient, you stop fearing the storm. The doomy vibration vanishes. It is replaced by the quiet confidence of a master carpenter who walks into a workshop. He doesn't fear the wood. He knows how to shape it. The Unfinished Symphony. We titled this final part, The Unfinished Symphony, for a specific reason. A computer program can be finished, a calculation can be solved. But a civilization, the living, breathing collaboration of billions of human beings, is never finished. Even with causal engines and immutable ledgers, there will be new problems. There will be new viruses, there will be solar flares, there will be conflicts we cannot imagine today. The causal engine will not solve them for us. It is not a messiah, it is not a parent. It is an instrument. It is sitting on the stand right now. The wood is polished, the strings are tuned, the sheet music is blank. It is waiting for a score that balances efficiency with kindness, profit with delight, and safety with freedom. The silence in the hall is deafening. The audience, your children, your neighbours, the future is waiting. You are no longer a passenger. You are the composer. You are the conductor. The baton is in your hand. It is time to play. End of part 4.